This year marks the 130th anniversary of the death of Ipswich's remarkable Mrs. Martin, who was afraid of no one and set Ipswich legal history. Mrs. Ellen Martin died in Ipswich in 1896. She was 90 years of age. Her father died at 106 and her mother at 107, so she was made of tough stuff. She was a native of Bangor in what was then Kings County, Ireland, and was a remarkable figure here in Ipswich for 41 years. She attended Mass daily and only gave that up when she could no longer walk. Mrs. Martin arrived in Moreton Bay in 1855 with her husband and their 9 children. The husband died shortly thereafter, leaving Mrs. Martin in the frontier city of Ipswich to raise her children alone. And she didn't back down one bit. In fact, she established a reputation as the most litigious Ipswich single mother in history. In 1858, Mrs. Martin bought 2 cows from Patrick McNamara. He was a regular in the Ipswich court for things like indecent and profane language, and even had a 12-month alcohol ban placed on him. Anyway, Mrs. Martin bought 2 cows of McNamara, who assured her they were both good milkers. But one of them turned out to be very different. Mrs. Martin paid £14 for the 2, estimated her damages at £5, and won the case. In 1860, Mrs. Martin's daughter married the Frenchman Auguste La Fontaine, but Mrs. Martin didn't like him much. A letter containing money arrived from Toowoomba addressed to him, care of Mrs. Martin. One son, Dennis, gave it to another son, Michael, who gave it to their mother, Mrs. Martin, who kept it herself. The son-in-law took them all to court, but the charges against the Martins were dismissed. However, the letter had to be handed over. Now, the daughter, Mary, was every bit like her mother, and took her husband La Fontaine to court, charged with assault and desertion. So there was probably good reason why Mrs. Martin didn't like him. Anyway, Mary also took her landlord Charles Kelly to court after he charged into her house to collect the rent. But Mary pushed him out the door and took him to court. She, of course, won both cases. In 1873, Mrs. Martin took her neighbour Robert Goff to court. He was a nephew of Ipswich's invincible Maurice Goff, who famously was shipwrecked off China and survived, speared by Aboriginals and survived, fallen on by a tree that killed his wife but survived, and so on. In any case, Miss Martin sued Goff, having her cattle impounded after they strayed onto his land. It turned out that Mrs. Martin, well, she was in the habit of letting her cattle out to graze for free. Also in 1873, Mrs. Martin and another neighbour, John Smith, sued and countersued one another on a daily basis. Smith was Ipswich royalty, but that didn't worry Mrs. Martin. You see, Smith was a driver of the very first passenger train in Queensland in 1865 and continued driving trains his entire life. And in Ipswich back then, there was no hire calling. In any case, their dispute concerned a vacant block that was between them. Mrs. Martin got the better of Smith after he spat at her with a mixture of saliva and tobacco particles. This so disgusted the judge that Smith was sentenced to 1 month imprisonment with hard labour, during which time Mrs. Martin used the vacant block unhindered. You see, from the day that Mrs. Martin arrived in Ipswich in 1855 to the day she died in 1896, she was a single mum who was afraid of no one. She became one of the most litigious people in Ipswich history, and certainly the most litigious single mother. So maybe she's worth commemorating in this, the 130th anniversary of her death.